Hey, I'm Elisa Parker. We're broadcasting live here from the Wild and Scenic Film Fest, the largest film festival of its kind in the United States. Like just thousands of people.
Thousands of people.
In Little Nevada City are coming together, and social change makers like David Braun, who's hanging out with us. David is the one of the leaders of the Americans Against Fracking movement. So anytime you see an uprising in the streets, that's usually because of this guy. And also on the DNC platform, David was significant in being part of that and really helping to shape that around the climate change initiatives. I mean, you could tell more to that, but that was a huge moment for you. I've been talking to everyone about their moments this year. That was a big deal.
Yeah, that was actually, if I can tell just a little bit of the story around it.
Tell a little bit of the story, and then we'll talk about the film you're here talking about.
Sure. So kind of an interesting thing happened. The DNC platform committee was a bit of a whirlwind. You start in meetings and trying to pass different amendments to the Democratic platform. Basically, what does the Democratic Party stand for? And so there's a lot of jockeying and a lot of, politics going on. But there's also just a lot of people who really believe in these Democratic Party values and what are our values. And so one of the things that we were putting forward is saying, calling for action on a climate emergency, that this is something that we were going to do in the first 100 days of the new administration. And I worked with Russell Green, who works with Progressive Democrats of America. He basically had written most of the language for this new amendment that we were putting forward. And we understood that there were some powers that were going to actually push back against what we were trying to move. Believe it or not, there are some fossil fuel energy interests inside the Democratic Party that are throwing around a lot of money and want to see their interests continue. So Russell put it forward, and then I came and spoke after. And I had this funny, because it's so intense. I think we had been up to maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, passing amendments the night before, and then we start, sharp at like 8 or 9 in the morning next. So nobody had really gotten much sleep. And so during my lunch break, I'd gone to take a nap. And so as I was napping, as I woke up from my nap during my lunch break, sure as day, I heard listen and then talk and then talk and then listen. And I heard it like as if somebody were saying it to me in the room.
Right.
The most bizarre thing. So I'm like, gosh, why is that? What did I hear? What is that about? And then I go into the meeting, and as soon as Russell starts to put forward the climate emergency language, thunder happens. And I said, listen, okay. And so he keeps going on, thunder keeps thundering. And as I get up to the microphone, I said, we have this climate emergency. And since I've been sitting here, we've been talking about this, the thunder, it was just kind of so much kind of overwhelming. I said randomly, the thunder gods have been talking. And as soon as I said that, there was thunder.
Get out. You were like download. You were in zeitgeist. This is the story I've not heard, David. This is not.
So I said, we're in a climate emergency, and we have to do something about this. And this is our responsibility. This is our watch. And after that, that happened, and after I spoke, we voted, and the amendment overwhelmingly passed. And we actually had one of those fossil fuel interests came up to us, and at the end, and said, we were planning on opposing you, but because that moment was what it was, there was no way that we could reverse the momentum that you had in pushing that forward. And so I think it was definitely Russell did a lot, I did some, and then I think the thunder gods were the ones that were speaking the loudest.
What a moment, David. And you know what I learned? So I learned so much about hearing about your process in that, because I think, most of the time we don't know about what's happening. And I'm going to use just the DNC as an example of creating a platform, right? And it really gave me privy to the process. And also when we talk about here, like people actually making a difference and the power that we have, here you are being able to have influence on the agenda for what we were hoping was going to be the Democratic president.
Right.
for a campaign,
right?
And that's amazing,
right,
to know that.
Yes,
influence.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and it was very, very interesting because I'm not usually the kind of person that has access to those halls of power, right? I think it was fairly remarkable that we had a big interest in uplifting some of the important issues that happened or that are going on. And so myself as a person who's definitely not an inside politics person, I'm simply an advocate that doesn't want to see our water poisoned and thinks that it's ludicrous to be pumping hundreds of thousands of pounds of toxic chemicals like ethylbenzene, like hydrofluoric acid. And I mean, for real, hydrofluoric acid. In the past 3 years in Los Angeles County, the oil industry has put 10 million pounds of hydrofluoric acid into the ground. This is happening near schools, homes. You don't want to be near hydrofluoric acid or hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid over a 3-year period, 20 million pounds.
Wow.
Ethylbenzene, 130,000 pounds over a 3-year period. We don't want ethylbenzene anywhere near our bodies. So that's my work. But to be honored and asked, the Sanders campaign asked me to be a part of the platform committee because of my commitment to the environment, and to have that access to power to just represent an issue, not because I have any drive to influence, have power or be an insider in politics, but mostly just because I want to try to elevate protecting communities, protecting water.
Right.
And that was just such an amazing experience. My eyes were definitely open, but it also really made me realize how important it is to have everyday people who just care about things actually be our leaders, run for office.
Right.
And you know a lot about that.
I do know a lot about that. And the other thing too is, David, for even looking at the anti-fracking movement, mm-hmm. There have been times, many times for many issues where people say that that's not possible.
Yes.
That's not possible.
Mm-hmm.
We know it's possible now because of your work with the convergence of so many others, like in New York State, for example.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, is that where, is her name Sandra?
Sandra,
because the film that David's actually here representing to talk about is called Unfractured. Is she from New York?
She is from New York.
So
she's from Ithaca, New York, was a professor at Cornell University, is a distinguished scholar in residence at Ithaca College, is a well-known author, research biologist, has done work for years about contaminants in the environment, chemicals in the environment, what that means. When she was 19 years old, she got cancer because she was drinking contaminated water downriver from a dry cleaning plant. And so here she is at 19 years old when she's supposed to be, dating and having this active lifestyle. She's, going to the hospital every day and undergoing chemotherapy. So she had dedicated her life to trying to eradicate these environmental causes of things like cancer. And we were very fortunate to have her step in to work on fracking. She won a $100,000 prize from the Heinz Foundation because of her work. Instead of taking that money and perhaps like writing a book or going on a vacation, or she took that money and actually that was the seed money to start a coalition called New Yorkers Against Fracking. We were a coalition that called for a ban on fracking, and basically used that money to elevate grassroots activism, because at that time it was before any national organizations were doing anything on fracking. And so in New York, though, we did have a fairly strong power base, but it was grassroots. It wasn't, NRDC wasn't, big in the fight there, or Sierra Club, they were participating, I think, but they weren't, throwing everything they had at it. And there was certainly a lot of us that felt like we needed to throw everything we had at it, that protecting our water from toxic chemicals is extremely important. Water is life, right? And especially because a lot of these chemicals, like ethylbenzene, can have an effect on your body in the parts per million or parts per trillion. So
Sandra takes action. And you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned this, like she's a mother.
Right, so she's a mother, yes, absolutely.
Her husband had a stroke during the time. Her husband
had a stroke and this is all documented in the movie. And she was as I know, because she and I worked together a lot during this time, I was also one of the founders of New Yorkers Against Fracking along with her. We would be on the phone sometimes till 3 or 4 in the morning working on different campaign things, writing press releases. And then there she would be. I'd see her online at 6 or 7 in the morning, just going. There's no one I know who's worked harder than her to protect the environment. And she essentially, coming together with health professionals, doctors, nurses, created the backbone for our scientific argument for why fracking was a bad thing. And really,
amazing.
along with some, Tony Ingraffia from Cornell University was another, and several others, really highlighting scientifically why this is a bad idea. And it was very interesting that we had environmentalists who would tell us, there's no way that you're going to stop the fracking industry from coming into New York State. You're so naive and thinking that you can actually stop the biggest industry in the world from doing basically what it is they want. And I would have environmentalists that would say, David, you should just be working on regulations. You should just be working to create the strongest protections you can, because you're going to be run over anyway. And I heard that many times, not just said to me, but to other people. And if we had believed that, if we had said, okay, we'll take what we can get, we would have lost.
And New York, what was it, the first state?
It was the second state.
The second state to ban fracking.
Yeah,
What's the first one?
Vermont was the first state, but Vermont has no shale, so it was largely ceremonial.
No fracking here, right? But here in California, my friends.
Here in California, but I will say that in New York, 60% of the state had been leased.
Wow.
So there was a huge financial investment already made in the state. And fracking, for all intents and purposes, fracking was moving forward. And we really did the unimaginable. David beat Goliath on that round. And I think, though, it gives us a very, very good lesson that nothing is inevitable.
That's right.
And don't believe it when you have what you perceive to be giant opposition, that you can win if you set your mind to it, you work with others, you clarify what your goal is, you develop smart tactics, and you build power to fight what's right. And especially if you have the science on your side, push, because there were so many times where they were moving forward, a pilot project was happening, this was happening, and it was like, we're going back to Albany, New York, which is, New York's capital and the equivalent of Sacramento here, but we would just keep standing up. Don't let what might seem like naysayers in the haters, but also insurmountable odds influence what it is you're doing. Fight with all your heart.
And I'm sure you've heard the same thing about California,
I
right?
have.
So, but there's possibilities here.
Tell
us about what's happening with Jerry Brown.
Well, so Jerry Brown right now, this year, is going to hold a Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco, where the whole world will be looking to Jerry Brown and his climate record. And so it's particularly exciting for us because this is the first year we've actually really had leverage over Jerry Brown, because we've heard out of his office and we know that the last thing he wants is to be protested at his Global Climate Action Summit. Sadly, though, Jerry Brown was a part of drafting or helping to pass legislation called SB4. SB4 was originally, about 5 years ago, was a moratorium bill on fracking here in the state of California. At the last minute, the oil lobby, which is incredibly powerful here in the state, got a hold of the bill, turned the bill from being a moratorium bill or stopping fracking entirely to being a disclose and study bill, which is always kind of that delay tactic for putting regulations or putting protections in place is always the tactic of the oil industry. And it worked. We studied the issue in a 2-year study, and we actually document this in our fact sheet, which really talks about the science. You can actually find this all at oilmoneyout.com. But the California scientists studied this issue. After 2 years, they came out with about 2,500 pages worth of science. And it made really, really clear findings. One of those findings said, unless fracking can be proven safe, it should be stopped. Wow. Fracking has not been proven to be safe. 2.5 years later, after that finding came out, nothing has been done. It also found, because they found that they were using things like hydrofluoric acid in urban areas, the scientists who wrote the study recommended that we have human health buffer zones around all oil operations, because hydrofluoric acid is extremely toxic when airborne. And we actually work with a number of different youth who were literally getting poisoned in their own home when they were 7 years old. Really super sad stories. So we identified 2.5 years ago that fracking is likely to contaminate our groundwater. We identified that people are getting poisoned in their own home by things like hydrofluoric acid. We made recommendations, and when I say we, taxpayer-paid scientists recommended very clear protections: stop fracking, human health buffer zones, which would effectively shut down a lot of the drilling in Los Angeles. And still to this day, 2.5 years later, under green California Jerry Brown, nothing has been done.
So we will see.
We will see.
And anything's possible.
Anything is possible.
What should we do?
What do we need to do? Well, I do want to say that Jerry Brown has indicated that he's willing to do something on oil this year.
Okay.
And so we really want to push him to do that. So one of the things that folks can do is simply just go to oilmoneyout.com and sign our petition there. We're going to actually be delivering those petitions on the 25th of January on the steps of the Capitol at 9 a.m., right before the governor's state of the state. We're going to be out there with our friends from Greenpeace. If we get the permits, we're going to have a big blimp over the Capitol saying, Brown, stop, drilling, or the most dangerous forms of drilling.
That's January 25th.
January 25th, the state capitol in Sacramento, California, on the North Steps. So,
all right, so we're going to be there. Rabble rouser David Braun. I love it. It's yes, it's so important. You do a lot of amazing work. I mean, it's.
We have to.
We have to. I was just saying though, sometimes it feels tireless. It's a lot of energy, and it's essential.
It is.
Right? It's essential, and so and hopefully we're also able to fill ourselves up with some good stuff.
Well, I think being with like-minded people.
Exactly.
Who have
that's the
dedicated,
groundswell. I was going to say that's our theme this year is groundswell at Wild Scenic, and that's what's happening, right? That's what's happening. We're rising up through the thick of the mud.
Yes.
We're emerging, and we're doing it together. So you're not in this alone.
No,
by any means.
You're not in this alone, and that's the wonderful thing about being able to sit down and have a conversation with you.
Right.
Is that I know that you're doing those same things. Really, you're convicted to trying to bring positive change, raise up women's voices, get really important protections in place, make sure that we have a fair and just society. And that's that thing that you can't, it fills your heart, but it also fuels your fire, because you can be like Sandra Steingraber, where you haven't gotten any sleep the night before, but here you are still doing it,
It's the fierceness.
It is the fierceness and belief.
Right, and the belief.
That our actions make a difference.
It does make a difference. If you've been watching the other videos, you understand they do make a significant difference, and you make a difference. The film's Unfractured. I know you want to say one more thing.
Of course I do.
When is the film screening, David?
The film screening tonight at 7 p.m. over at Oddfellows in Grass Valley.
Okay.
And can I say one more thing?
What did you want to say?
I want to say that everyone can make a difference in that way. All of you can, and strongly encourage you. If you say something is bad, or if you say something's hurting the world, I strongly encourage you to follow that up with action, so that you can actually realize what it is that you're saying and demonstrate it to the world, to spirit, to people in your community, and actually actualize what it is you're saying. But then you also become a part of a community who's demonstrating their shared values for a better planet together. And so we invite everyone to come in and be a part of this movement, which is going to save this beautiful place for the generations to come and the people that are currently living here.
Thank you, David.
Thank you,
David
Elisa.
Braun. I'm Elisa, Wild and Scenic Film Festival. Thanks for joining us. We'll be right back.